Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Pål and Ville. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Daydreaming. We are back after a very nice, long and relaxing summer, at least for most of us. We are ready to go and kick off season 10 of our podcasts. We're really happy to have you back with us today, dear listeners, and we will now start the season as usual with the fintech highlights from the Nordics. And because of that, I'm of course joined as usual by my friend and podcast co-host, Pål. Pål, how are you today? How was your summer?
My summer was fantastic, Ville. It was short, condensed, but wonderful. Good time with friends and family. We even went to the cinema, you and I, and saw a movie, right? So it was good. It was relaxed. I am now back at work, focused and ready to hit the second half of the year. And I'm really excited about the lineup of guests we've got for season 10 in front of us. So, no. Perfect. Wonderful.
Yeah. Happy to hear. Same with me as well. I mean, it was a long summer. I had my vacation in two parts and worked a bit in the middle. But as you can expect, Julys, especially here in the Nordics, are a bit slow time in the office. But now back in the office this week, it's gonna be quite hectic now for the second half of this year for sure. Work-wise and podcast-wise, like you said, we have plenty of really interesting guests coming up. But more on that later. But of course, since we are doing fintech highlights, Janne, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So yeah, also back at the office as usual with my dog, as you may hear. But the summer went very fast, and good to be back. I spent some time at the summer cottage, did some sailing, and then did some traveling as well. So, is it ruining everything?
Is what ruining everything?
You cannot hear anything.
No.
Seriously.
No. It's all part of the flavor.
My dog is barking. Okay, I can hear it.
The question is, do we leave this in? Do we leave this in, or do we start again?
No, I can. Maybe we can just jump cut from my summer. But yeah, also did some traveling. I like to explore new countries. Also like to see if you can actually travel cashless nowadays. So went to Moldova, new country for me in the Eastern Europe. I would say that's pretty much cashless already. Found a few places where they say that they cannot accept card, and they say that sorry, I don't have cash, and suddenly their card terminal appeared somewhere on the bar desk. And then also went to Transnistria, which is actually an interesting region because they don't accept Visa or MasterCard at all. So that was quite a new experience for me. But yeah, all good. Exciting summer.
Yeah. That's a good point. I actually traveled to Greece, Albania, the Netherlands, and then Belgium for different music festivals. And same, I had a few €100 with me in cash just in case, but those €200 I never needed. I never touched them at all, partly due to the fact that these festivals have their own closed-loop payment systems as well, which is another interesting story. In fact, Pål, maybe we should have a guest from one of these festival organizers, because again, this whole money management in these music festivals is quite interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Yeah. But it actually reminds me of another piece of information that I came across on LinkedIn. Several people complaining about the payment capabilities at the Olympics in France, in Paris, because it's sponsored by Visa. So you can only pay with Visa cards. If you happen to have a MasterCard or anything else, it won't be accepted. You can only pay by Visa, which is fantastically interesting situation to have, right?
Wow, that is a step backwards for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. We need to dwell into that for sure later, because again, this seems like a step backwards in terms of electronic payments. Unless of course you're a Visa user, then it's of course fantastic. But hey, good. Let's get on with it. The usual way we start with these shows as well is that we of course need to start the season with the first joke of the season, and today it's going to be provided by Janne. Is that right?
Yes.
So go for it.
Yeah, I'll have a topical one fitting this week and this Monday. So what's the difference between a stockbroker and a magician?
No idea.
No idea.
The stockbroker doesn't need a wand to make your money disappear.
Yeah, indeed. We did see a lot of money disappear on Monday this week. So just dating the episode here a little bit. So we had the interesting crash, and we're not going to see the last of that. Also reminds me of the South Park episode where the banker says, "And it's gone." But anyway, good. But on with the show. Again, let's start, Janne, by maybe you can recap a little bit. So what happened over the summer, June, July, in terms of investments, overall situation in the fintech space here in the Nordics, and then we can go into individual news articles after that, as usual.
Yes, absolutely. So now it's been 2 months since the last update. We'll cover both June and July. July was a bit more quiet as usual here in the Nordics, but June was actually very, very active. The funding went literally off the charts. I will get back to that a bit later. We saw a lot of news, especially ESG was quite a hot topic. Some personal finance management been also trending, payments as usual. And I would say that if nothing very dramatic happens in the macroeconomics, I think we'll have a very, very good autumn. And that being said, the Q2 season now is on. We've seen banks giving pretty solid results. Of course, now where will the interest rates actually settle? That's a big question. And yeah, banks have been also active in partnerships. I guess we'll talk about a bit about those later. But yeah, we can go in more detail bit sooner.
Great. So alive and kicking, even though it's summertime, as already mentioned earlier. July is basically nothing happening in most of financial services, at least here in the Nordics. But happy to hear that June was very busy. We're still alive and kicking, and I couldn't agree more that this second half of this year is going to be interesting from a macroeconomic perspective, and that will for sure have an impact on the fintech funding as well in the Nordics, because again, turbulent times means more uncertain times for fintechs as well as other companies as well. So again, going to be a very interesting second half of this year. Any reflections, Paul, from your perspective on the summer and the upcoming rest of the year?
On the summer, like Janne said, I mean, we saw an awful lot happening in June, July being very quiet, being the Nordics and everybody relaxing and recharging their batteries. As for the rest of the year, obviously there's some interesting things happening in the macroeconomics and globally with Japan and the rest of the world. So let's see how that all plays out now for the next couple of months, and how it will affect fintech and the banking industry in general. But outside of that, I think we're going to continue to see continued speculations and growth of discussions around generative AI and AI. I think that bubble is on the cusp of either exploding or growing. OpenAI is starting to have financial difficulties. Let's see how that's going to play out. But I also, quite interestingly, have seen some reports from analysts highlighting that there is a severe skills gap shortage of people in the financial industry, particularly with emerging technology skill sets at a senior level. So it'll be interesting to see how that will also play out. A new round of clever young people need to be found to keep everything running, I think. So let's see how the whole fintech space develops for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the lack of or absence of technical capabilities in the senior leadership of especially banks for many years now, and I think we're now again starting to see that materializing in a more concrete way. Maybe we will have more technology-oriented people, especially in the emerging technology space, as well in senior roles in financial institutions. That would be a fantastic balance to have, I think, in most places. Not to replace the existing setup, but I think there is an imbalance there right now in terms of having people with technical backgrounds in senior leadership of especially banks. But again, you heard this already several years ago from this podcast, and we're now observing this next phase in this development as well. But great, let's move on with the news stories then. So Paul, do you want to go first?
Oh, of course I can. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, Ville, that I've got a passion for financial literacy, and whenever we see fintechs growing up or other financial institutions that take the financial well-being of their customers and the general society at heart, I think that's very, very good, and it really makes me feel positive about the direction we're going in, particularly as we see a continued growth of foundational uncertainty and complexity in most people's financial lives. So Gimi, who is a Swedish fintech focused on the sort of financial education of the younger people in the Nordics and globally. We actually had Philippe Haglund, their founder and CEO, on an episode some seasons back. But over the summer, they created a partnership with Nordea, where Nordea will be, as I can understand it, initially in Norway, implementing the Gimi solution into their mobile banking capabilities, specifically to give financial literacy and financial education capabilities to their younger customers in partnership with these kids, parents and family. And I think this is a fantastic thing to see. I want to see a lot more of this. So big kudos to Nordea for doing this. I want to see all the other Nordic banks doing the same. It doesn't have to be with Gimi, but Gimi have got some great solutions. But understanding that your future customers are the young customers today, and the more that you nurture them, help them, and empower them to understand how to deal with their financial life going forwards is going to help you to build that close relationship with these future potential strong customers for the banks, particularly as we're starting to see, as we've discussed before, people are diluting their relationship with financial institutions and multi-homing these days, right? We're seeing a number of young people, particularly, having relationships with multiple financial institutions and jumping depending upon where they get in the offers that they are looking for. I think there is a need for continued education, a stronger focus on financial literacy, and I think what Nordea is doing with Gimi is fantastic. I want to see more of this.
Now, I didn't have a chance to research this news bit too much, but I mean, Paul, obviously you did. How is it going to work? I mean, is the Gimi features going to be implemented inside the Nordea application, or is Nordea going to be a bank option in the Gimi application? How is it going to work from a user perspective?
That's a fantastically good question, Ville. And I also tried to get into this as much as possible, and I did not find an answer to that. My hope is that it actually will be part of the Nordea application rather than having the Nordea customer jump between applications. I know that Gimi do support a API style integration into bank applications. So I'm hoping that is the route that Nordea is taking in Norway. But irrespectively, if there is a good connection there between the Gimi app and the Nordea app, or some other way to enable the Nordea consumers to take advantage of this, then all good with me.
Yeah, so again, full disclosure, unless you knew, I of course work for Nordea Bank, but I have nothing to do with this specific thing. But just reflecting on the external news perspective from my side as well, I completely agree with you, Paul. I think the most underserved segments in the banking space in general seems to be my favorite, the SME segment and the corporate segment, but also the youth segment, and further extending that to the underbanked segment in general. But specifically on the youth and children's side, I think when I was young, when I was in the 80s, when I had my first bank account, I got these nice colorful cards for ATMs, and we had our special bank deposit books and things with kind of holograms and things like this. All of this has disappeared. I don't think that anything like this exists, mainly due to risk aversion and strict regulation when it comes to providing accounts and banking services for the underserved. But I'm happy to see that the digital age and companies like Gimi are driving this forward, because again, these people, these children, these youth, these are the people who will have the mortgages in the future. These are the people who will do investments as well. And if you have that connection already done at an early age, of course, that should be a no-brainer proposition. Furthermore, I think the more important thing here is the financial education angle, and I think Gimi is doing this in a very good way as well, making sure that at an early age you understand what is money, where it's coming from, how you use it, and how you get more of it in an understandable and easy way, is something that financial institutions should be taking seriously. And this is, of course, a very good step towards those kinds of things. Janne, any reflections for this news bit?
Well, I actually had exactly the same question. Is Gimi integrated in the Nordea app? Because as we have been discussing in this podcast also previously, so I think everyone has at least enough apps already on their phone, and they don't need a single app more. And would be definitely interesting to know how the setup is actually built. Is it inside the app, or is it just a link or something? I understand that it's for banks. It's of course difficult to make integrations and incorporate external stuff in their app. And of course, it would be much easier to just have, hey, click this link and then you go to the Gimi app. But that's quite much worse in the usability perspective. But yeah, we have to figure that one out and see. And I think generally, as we know, traditional banks have a bit slower ability or less flexibility in terms of integrating and creating new stuff in their apps. And then I think, like, if we go then again on the more techie bank side, like Revolut, so they are experts in just setting up new features on a monthly basis. But yeah, thumbs up for Gimi and financial literacy efforts.
So we could also just do a straight call out here to our listeners. Anyone listening from Gimi or Nordea in Norway, let us know. Tell us, is it integrated into the Gimi app or the Nordea app? What does it look like? How does it function? What is the golden nugget here? Let us know. Let our listeners know.
Yes, indeed. Let's get that done. I know we have a lot of listeners, especially in both of these organizations actually. So let's hope that somebody picks this up. One more additional point, and this is actually something that is very difficult to achieve, especially in these days in banks with their own financial result always top of mind, and that is the fact that when you do create services, especially for this youth and younger segment, you have to do that with the expectation that specific customer will not give you your money back at any time soon. So again, you have to build the case for these type of services in a very long term perspective. You also have to understand that it's a complementary service to their parents and custodians and guardians. Again, they might prefer the bank or think that the bank is better and be a more kind of a loyal customer for those cases, for banks that actually provide these services for the younger generation. But that is from an internal perspective, building that case that we need to do this investment because of these not indirect revenue streams is a very difficult to do. So again, kudos to everybody who's able to do that, especially in these current environments. It is not easy. I can definitely attest to that. Furthermore, I did want to mention that actually just recently, Monzo Bank in the UK also launched a bank account for children, which is interesting because this is it's a no-fee bank account and potentially also a savings account linked to that, and a colorful debit card that you're able to give to the child. But the more interesting part there is the control part. So again, when you do provide a debit card for a child, especially when they are at the age where they might not understand the value of money, especially the online spending is a fairly complicated thing. So they might be spending money that they don't understand that they're spending, and therefore having controls where the parents can basically sign transactions done by the children online, for example. So having this kind of a fall right principle for online transactions. Those types of things are super interesting to implement, and also interesting furthermore to other types of scenarios where you might be a custodian or a guardian for someone else. Yes, Paul, you had a point.
Yeah, we should be kind here and point out. I mean, I have my primary bank, if we these days even talk about primary bank, but I do have my primary bank with Orpea here in Finland. And by default, as most parents do, they bring their children into their primary bank. And so I should be kind here and also highlight that Orpea do support banking for minors from a certain age up, and they do have a variant of their banking app, which is aimed at children and co-managed by the parents. So it's not as if the other banks don't have any capabilities. I think it's more just the part that Nordea is doing here with Gimi to do that financial literacy and well thought out gamification to help children and the younger generation to understand money management.
Yep. I still want to see that card with holograms, though. That's the bottom line. Well, anyway, good. But anyway, moving on. Interesting story as usual. Financial inclusion always top of mind for financial literacy as well. Top of mind for all of us here in Fintech Daydreaming. But let's move on. Janne, what did you pick for us this week?
Yeah. So talking about funding. Finnish fintechs have had quite a terrible beginning of this year. It was dead quiet in terms of new funding rounds. Actually, in July, we saw 3 Finnish fintech companies closing a funding round. So we had Clubby, the loyalty company, Receipt Hero, the digital receipt company, and then Whammo, the business account provider. So they all closed the funding round in July. So good that Finnish entrepreneurs are not having vacation. They're raising funding. And then the grand slam was in June when AlphaSense, the Finnish founded market intelligence AI company, raised $650 million with a 4 billion valuation. And then they also announced that they bought their kind of competitor, a company called Tegus. It's also like a market intel platform. It's maybe a bit more research driven investment analysis tool, but they acquired them for $930 million. So now we're really talking about riding the big AI wave and throwing some big numbers on the table.
So for the listeners that might have missed the episode where we talked about this or just been living under a rock in general, so what does AlphaSense do?
Yes, so someone put it's the Google of investors. So AI company which searches for unstructured financial data such as written information, press releases, financial reports, and then it combines the data and put it into an easy readable kind of comparable format where you can find investment targets or acquisition targets or just benchmark competition. They've been doing that for quite a long time, primarily focusing on very big SP100 companies, Goldman Sachs and stuff like that. Now they've been expanding a bit, opening offices to London and Frankfurt as well. But yeah, they have engineering in Finland and India. But really, they were doing generative AI before it was super sexy.
Yeah, and as we all know, as long as you have AI, especially if you have generative AI in your pitch, then you're really good, especially this year, as we have learned from the investment rounds. So just one more question on AlphaSense. I guess their data set is global. So in effect, their market is global.
Yeah, it's you can use it globally, but they've started quite with a strong focus on Wall Street, and now moving towards the big financial centers like London, Singapore, etc. But of course, like you could say it's like the AI-driven startup version of Bloomberg. So of course, companies are using Bloomberg in Finland as well, or Nordics.
Right. Paul, any comments on the sudden burst of investments in the Finnish fintech space?
Yeah, I think there was two elements in the news articles that Janne picked up. And the first one is around the whole melting pot of AI, and particularly around fintechs. We're starting to get out of that phase where everybody is just using the term AI to try and drive more funding and to get more money and more visibility. And therefore, we're also starting to see this transition from ludicrously stupid ideas of use cases and capabilities around generative AI to something which actually makes sense and is going to drive value, true value, in the right way. I mean, we're still seeing a lot of discussions around, well, how do we use generative AI, particularly in banking? Where does it fit? Where can we use it? What are the regulators saying, etc. So it's fantastic to see some fintechs that are actually understanding this complexity and bringing true value in a way that it actually works, rather than just delivering garbage crap. Secondly is around funding. I also think that we've gone through a period where we've seen a decline in funding, seen a tightening of the belt on finances and money, and again, fundamental uncertainty. It's nice to see that this is starting to relax a little bit, and we're seeing larger funding groups coming into a growing fintech space again. What is encouraging me a little bit with that is obviously the investment is being managed and valuated a little bit more carefully, which means that when the funding is being handed out, it's being handed out to companies that really have got a good, strong business case. They can demonstrate where they're going to get return on investment, rather than, we've got 5,000 million registered users that maybe don't do anything, right? So I think positive on both sides. It's great to see some true engagement of AI, generative AI, and funding being managed in the right way.
Yeah, well summarized, and nothing to add on the funding side. I think everything was said on that front already. I do want to add that the AI washing that we've been seeing lately is hopefully starting to fade away, and that links to the further trend that we're seeing probably towards the end of this year, like you mentioned in the beginning, Paul, is that we're going to see the Gen AI bubble start to either deflate or even pop to a certain extent. And once that happens, then it is really the companies that have built something real that will survive or will be exposed in a positive way. Because then when all the kind of hot air pops away from this, it will be companies like AlphaSense that actually do relevant things with AI that will be looking really, really good. One funny thing I noticed over the summer is that Samsung, who also does, among many other things, does washing machines. They released a washing machine that has a literal button that says AI wash. So that's if you want to do AI washing, buy a Samsung washing machine, and then you'll be all set.
There's a phrase that fits quite nicely to this, right? When the tide goes out, you'll see everyone that's not wearing their swimsuit.
Yes, indeed. Great. good to see these patterns repeating. We all saw this already with blockchain. We saw this with so many other things before. And again, it's at the end of the day, it is value to the customers that will actually be surviving at the end of the day. But moving on, the last story, and it's my story, which I picked. Actually, it's two stories. It's about biometrics and specifically fingerprint biometrics in payments. The headline says that Fingerprints, a Swedish company, and Valid to launch biometric payment card in Brazil, and they had a similar piece of news for Fingerprints and IN Group as well. So what is Fingerprints? Fingerprints is a fairly old company, actually, from Sweden. They've been doing fingerprint sensors for more than 20 years already in different form factors. In fact, you actually are able to find their sensors embedded in many mobile devices, mostly Chinese brands of mobile devices and Android phones, in addition to many other places where people use fingerprints for multiple purposes. Fingerprints has now, or in the past 5-10 years, they have been developing their technology for contactless payment cards. So again, there's a very specific set of requirements that go into having a fingerprint sensor in a plastic card with a very limited battery capabilities. And to make that reliable, fast, and secure, of course, is a very big challenge. Fingerprints has done that. They have even launched with some banks together with partners in mostly emerging markets, I would say. And it seems like they are now gaining momentum now with these announcements, with different kinds of partnerships with their new chip for the fingerprint recognition. So all good for Fingerprints. Again, good luck to them. I checked their share price, and they have been definitely suffering. They're listed in the Swedish or the Stockholm stock market. Their stock has not been doing well over the years, but again, they're looking for new momentum in the payment solution space. I did want to expand this story, and the reason I picked this story is the broader conversation around biometrics in physical payment instruments and using fingerprints in cards. Because again, if you think about the way you pay, especially in Europe, US, most of the countries will already have a high penetration of payment cards like MasterCard and Visa schemes. The typical trend has been that the biometric sensor sits in the phone, or the biometric is done in the phone, either with Face ID or whatever fingerprint sensor you might have in your phone. And then the trend has been towards moving away from a separate plastic to having that payment instrument inside your selected mobile device, including the biometric sensor themselves. So interesting to see whether these separate sensors on separate cards will be a trend beyond these underbanked markets that they have already been quite successful in. And the reason why this might change actually is that we are going to see central bank digital currencies and central banks moving into the digital currency space. And one thing that they want to make sure is that financial inclusion is a big element in these new schemes supported by the likes of the European Central Bank and the digital euro. And in those conversations, they also want to include customers that might not have, either don't want to have or cannot have access to smartphones, and therefore having a highly secure solution done in a physical separate card will be on the table again. So something that might have been almost like a forgotten thing in the card penetrated markets might be popping up again. Again, interesting to see how this is going to move forward. But Janne, what do you think about fingerprint sensors in payment cards?
Yeah, thank you for actually enlightening me, because as I've been following the Nordic news, I've really noticed that fingerprints from Sweden, then IDEX biometrics from Norway, they have been really in the news almost on a monthly basis. Some new partnerships in tech, but then also acquiring new customers. And I've been thinking, like, why the heck? Because I have my fingerprint sensor here. Why would I need a card with that one? But now, as you mentioned, so yeah, there are maybe some new cases coming up, and then of course I'm in my Nordic bubble, and of course the world is different, and not everyone is having a smartphone either. So yeah, maybe obviously there is some demand in maybe other regions, or maybe even in the Nordics in the future if things are changing.
And furthermore, beyond that, there's a conversation to be had around the fact that we are basically putting everything in a single device. So if you lose that device, then that becomes a security risk automatically. There's many scenarios where you can kind of bypass the biometrics, for example, on the iPhone and things like this. If you have a separate card where you have a second factor for the biometrics, and then that connected to your phone, that's automatically more secure, because again, the thief would actually have to steal both of those things in order to get access to the device and have some kind of replication of the biometrics. So becoming exponentially more difficult. From a usability perspective, might not be optimal, but some people might want to protect, for example, high value transactions with that kind of extra factor. But yeah, again, rambling off here. Paul, what do you think?
You've made me laugh for a minute there, Phil. I'm just, you said the two-factor, having your phone and then having the card with the extra, fingerprint reader on it, and how much good that will be and everything else. And I thought, if I actually think about most of my colleagues and friends, they have got a sticky-on wallet on the back of their phone with their cards in. So if someone steals your phone, they're stealing your bloody card anyway, right? So that whole capability is just lost straight away. But that aside, there's actually two elements to all of this. I did have that question a little bit like Janne as well, but hang on a minute. We're all paying with our phone or our watches or our rings or whatever the case may be these days. But like you quite rightly pointed out, not everybody has got a mobile phone. So having a card, a piece of plastic, or maybe the card is made out of wood or whatever the case may be, I don't know, irrelevant, makes sense. But then I also thought for a minute, you said it's got a small battery in it. Does that mean that everybody needs to run around and charge their credit cards? If you don't have a phone and you've got a wallet, does that mean that you have to take your wallet to a charger every 3 days or something, right? So imagine if you forget to charge your card and you go to the shop and suddenly you can't pay because the battery is flat on your payments card.
So in general, again, details are unclear to me at this point in time, but in general, the point would be that the power that it needs actually comes from the magnetic field when you tap on the device itself. So it has just enough power to do that reading with that power alone. In addition, it has a small battery, I believe, that is able to maintain certain functions, like, for example, if you have to generate a one-time code. Now, how long does the battery last? Good question. Maybe we can use, as a reference, we can use these kind of one-time generator, OTC code generators that we got from our banks once upon a time. And in general, those things tend to last for years. The general shelf life of physical cards, 2 to 5 years, I believe. So again, that might go somewhere between that bracket, I would believe. Again, technical details were not that much available from these websites that I found related to these things, but I'm sure we'll be able to find out.
Yeah, let's not go into the whole fiasco scenario I had when the battery ran out of my identification device for my bank in Sweden. There's lots about that on LinkedIn, so if anyone's interested in that fiasco that lasted multiple years for me, then please go and read that.
Good. On that, we can leave the topic of biometrics, and I did want to cover one more thing before we close this episode, and that is, let's go around the table and ask, what are you most expecting for the remainder of 2024? What is your highlight that you want to see before the year is over and our season 10 is over? And just mention one or two things, and we'll leave it with that. Janne, you go first.
Yeah, well, if we talk in a bigger picture, so interesting to see kind of the AI bubble or boom, how that will turn around, and also macroeconomics. And then actually we will be discussing both of those topics. In November, we'll have the Nordic Banking Forum, 28th of November in Helsinki. We'll be talking about geopolitics, macroeconomy. We'll be talking about capital markets. We'll talk about impact EU regulation, of course, AI as well. And happy to also have you there if you're calendar allows, and of course all the listeners, we can again throw in a discount with the code Daydreaming.
Fantastic. I will be there for sure. Not sure if I'm going to be on stage this time, but at least I will be there saying hello to all the listeners and all my other friends in the fintech space here in Finland. Okay, so Paul, how about you? What's your highlight for the rest of this year?
Well, first of all, yes, I will be there as well, like you, Ville. Janne, I think we need to have a Fintech Daydreaming stage, or at least a Fintech Daydreaming session. So we'll talk about that later, right?
Yeah.
What do well, I mean, on a personal level, Ville, I look forward to seeing explosive growth of Fintech Daydreaming, of more listeners and new guests and everything else onto our show. That's, I think, one of the main things that I'm looking forward to. Apart from that, like we said, there is, I think, an explosion of focus on compliance and regulations in the banking industry. I think we're going to see an awful lot of change around that. Generative AI, I think, is going to explode at some point in time. We're going to see something interesting there. And I am waiting for the approaching train on quantum computing to come. We have been toying with the discussions around quantum computing. I admit that, true quantum computing at scale is potentially 5 years away, but I think we're going to start seeing growth here, and I'm excited to try and see if we can't explore the area of quantum computing, particularly connected with generative AI and the other emerging technologies, on our podcast going forwards.
Interesting. We talked about quantum before in the podcast, and I think the conclusion we had is that there's yet to be a proper use case for quantum. All the use cases are basically about creating quantum resistant algorithms and defenses against quantum attacks. So again, it's the first use case will be to attack different kind of infrastructure with quantum, and all we're talking about is how do we defend against those things. But what are the positive use cases? That's definitely an interesting topic for the rest of this year. I agree. Let's see if we can find somebody to talk about that even here on the podcast. Good. Beyond everything that was already mentioned, my highlights for the rest of the year is that, I'm going to do a trip to Mexico in October, private, so that's going to be fun, but that's another story. The highlights, other than, of course, meeting our fintech friends in November in the event, I have multiple events where I'm speaking, all of which will be on my LinkedIn page. Follow those. But from a macro perspective, I think the number one thing that I will be looking at will be the evolution of the political environment, especially in Europe, and by extension, what's going to happen in North America, because all of those things will have a direct impact on the, especially from my perspective, the digital euro and central bank digital currencies, because they're very sensitive to the political environment and what is the backing of the political engine, so to say. So again, those might be taking different directions depending on what the political environment looks like for the rest of this year and beyond. And again, that also has a reflection to the broader economic environment. And then we're going to see things like changes in attitudes towards funding and the way fintechs and financial services are expected to be regulated. So again, all eyes on politics and what will be the concrete impact of those environments into our industry. With that, this has been the first episode of season 10. I hope you enjoyed it. We will move forward. And again, as we mentioned, it's going to be a very exciting season with interesting guests. Looking forward to having you with us for the next episode and beyond. As usual, you'll be able to find us on all the social medias, all the podcasting platforms, and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Every click helps us to spread the message further of our fantastic gospel of fintech that we're doing here. With that being said, this has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.